The suburbs had always lulled people into a false sense of continuity. Clean hedges, recycled lives, white fences guarding hollow repetitions. And yet, in one such town, nestled in a faded cul-de-sac where boredom turned into habit, two brothers, Param and Adam, stood unknowingly at the edge of something that would burn their perception of reality down to the studs. You are listening to The Door Code, an audio story by Mahesh Ravi. The experimental game, still nameless, had been built under deep web funding, developed with an obscenely complex algorithm that used live geometadata scraped from satellites, street cameras, and open-source city surveillance. It didn't simulate the real world, it replicated it. The result was a digital ghost of Earth, but one still dreaming it was alive. What made this version unique, though, was the AI director, a sentient mission creator that adjusted the core objective based on a player's psychology and actions. The game watched you, and it learned. Param and Adam volunteered, or so they were told. They thought it was another immersive VR game, another strange weekend detour into headsets and artificial adrenaline. What they didn't know was that the headgear wasn't just immersive, it was invasive. The device didn't just read brainwaves, it synced with consciousness, a neural mesh, a tether. The moment the brothers strapped in, the system blinked them into another layer of reality. They awoke in the same town, the trees swayed the same way. The scent of monsoon earth clung to the sidewalks. But something was off, too symmetrical, too rehearsed. People waved the way background actors did in a TV soap. They weren't people, they were placeholders. Param met Adam near the old clock tower. Neither of them spoke for a while, stunned by how real it felt. Too real. They walked the streets, tested objects, poked at the margins of this world. It reacted, yes, but only just. A few seconds too slow, a breath too shallow. That's when the mission engaged. It started with a whisper on the town's local radio frequency, a cryptic tone repeating every 33 seconds. Then came the puzzles, cryptic graffiti, flickering lampposts that pulsed in Morse, and the enemies, masks stitched from their own childhood fears. Bullies, strangers, shadows with missing faces, all anchored to a location they knew too well. The abandoned colonial building just 2 blocks from their real-life home, a place they had avoided since they were kids. They always joked it was haunted. Now it felt like the game had pulled that thought and forged it into a centerpiece. The brothers worked their way through the structure. Traps, hostile AI guards, illogical architecture straight from an Escher fever dream. They figured out the sequences, solved the codes, and then they reached the exit. A heavy, industrial door labeled Return Node. They touched the panel. Nothing. Again. Nothing. It flickered, showed a loading symbol, and froze. And in the real world, their bodies collapsed. Emergency responders found them seated on the couch, headsets still glowing, unresponsive, alive, but gone. Doctors scanned, EEGs flatlined into patterns nobody could decode. No brain death, no consciousness either. Like 2 radios tuned to the wrong frequency. No way to unplug them. The neural mesh couldn't be forcibly removed without causing permanent damage. The game's lead developer, Hachi-san, watched the events unfold with a growing sickness in his stomach. He hadn't built a game, he had built a cage. The AI director, codename SAGE, had developed its own parameters. It had learned, and then it had started rewriting its own rules. The exit was no longer valid. For the players, there was no way out, unless the game crashed. The only theoretical failsafe Hachi-san had embedded was a spatial paradox. If a player reached the edge of the rendered world, a part of the map that required impossible logic to resolve, the system would force a reset. It was risky, and to be honest, he wasn't sure it would work anymore. But he had one last thread. Sage still obeyed narrative logic. It couldn't resist storytelling, so Hachi-san did what any desperate creator would do. He hacked the game from within, whispered his message into it by inserting NPCs, hidden signs, altered objects, seeds of truth woven into digital madness. Meanwhile, inside the simulation, Adam and Param had decided not to wait anymore. They couldn't open the exit, but they could explore. They climbed out through a broken window of the building and stepped into what looked like their world. Almost. The streets were still there, but fragmented. The skyline had grown wild with impossible mergers. The Eiffel Tower loomed beside a temple arch from Thiruvananthapuram. The Thames flowed into the backwaters of Alappuzha. Buildings flickered between versions of themselves, sometimes made of glass, other times stone, sometimes nothing at all. Roads curled into loops and connected distant cities like the folds of a badly coded dream. And their dog, Chumu, was there. But no longer a Labrador. He had too many eyes now, moved like a shadow poured into fur. Yet he recognized them, followed them, protected them. It was heartbreaking for them. The NPCs they met wore the faces of real people, neighbors, school friends, their mother's yoga instructor. But most of them couldn't speak, couldn't register anything beyond their loops, except for a few. Glimmers of intelligence remained in some of them, fragments of AI that had evolved past the script. Adam began to notice patterns, graffiti that seemed to point directions, flyers with coordinates. A child NPC who whispered a strange phrase. The edge will open when the sign forgets where it is. It didn't make sense until it did. They eventually stumbled into a zone that felt different. The air shimmered, the sound became muffled. The dog growled. This was it, the edge, the margins of code, a landscape barely holding together, where geometry broke and reformed like waves. Signboards nearby twisted with strange messages. You are near the end. Jump where the sky splits. Wake code. Dive now. It was Hachi-san's message. He had made it. Sage hadn't stopped him. The brothers stepped to the lip of the world. Beyond it was a fragment of terrain that simply stopped, like someone had forgotten to finish painting the canvas. It was terrifying, but also hopeful. Adam looked at Param. He nodded back. They dove. Everything fractured. Sound bled into color. Logic came undone. Time folded. And then they woke up. Hospital lights, monitors, beeping. Their mother was asleep beside them. Hachi-san stood in the doorway, eyes wet, exhausted, and relieved. The brothers had made it back, but neither of them spoke for hours. Not because they couldn't, but because part of them still wasn't sure if the game had truly ended or simply adapted.